Hello, everybody. On this episode, how to read a feed tag, Show Pig Edition.
To the Front, the show that answers questions for stock show families. Presented by TTF Nutrition, livestock supplements that get you to the front.
Welcome to the front. I am joined by always the lovely and talented Thomas Gross. How are you doing, big man?
I'm doing great. These intros keep getting more and more unrealistic, I guess, every time. You know, I've been called lovely and talented by exactly 0 people ever before, so I appreciate it, buddy.
So tell us all about what's going on in your world. You have had some big news here lately.
Yeah, we just got home from Expo not too long ago, and we had a pretty good trip out there, and we took a couple that we were pretty excited about, and I think we were able to hang a banner with one of them, so it was a lot of fun.
Very, very good. Well, that sounds like it deserves a special segment, so I'm not capable of doing a drum roll, but I think there's a little guy next to you that probably is ready to jump in here, see if everybody can figure out what happened.
He wanted to swap out his banner up here and get rid of the old and in with the new, I guess.
So we went down with the Landrace Bear from NJSS, and we're coming back with
another cruiser.
The Reserve Champion Landrace Gilt at the 2026 Exposition. How about Stinky? Good job, guys.
He had a fun time, so that's been a special gilt for us, and one that personality-wise has made her a lot of fun in our house too. And so, I think when the pigs are good and their personality's good, it makes it an even better time.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Well, congratulations to you guys. That is big, big news. Not a lot of people get to make a banner swap on a podcast.
I also saw something that caught my eye just a second ago. And, you got a little I heart something going on over there. What we got across your chest there?
Oh, hang on just a minute. Let me get this out of the way for everybody. Get a good chest view.
Bacon.
I heart bacon.
Okay.
Sorry, that might have been a bit much. So the week before, all the show pigs are out there. For those of you guys who don't know, I am the director of the swine business unit for MWI Animal Health, and we work with all the major pharmaceutical manufacturers. And this was one of the giveaways in our tent during the Commercial World Pork Expo. I Heart Bacon, sponsored by Beringer Ingelheim. So thank you to those guys. And if you were out there, you would have got you a blue or a gray I Heart Bacon shirt.
I have not met anyone that I trust yet that doesn't love bacon. So, I'm sure that there's somebody, but
I've seen 2 things lately that describe me to a T. One, you got to trust people that love bacon. And I love bacon. The other thing, people that use profanity are more trustworthy and live longer. And that made me realize I'm immortal. So I'm right in there. So it's going to be really good. You're never getting rid of me.
I think when you sent that to me, I think my question to you was about correlation versus causation, and I never got a response back on that data set.
Part of it is just you gotta let some air out of the balloon sometimes.
Is that how that goes?
Yeah. And nobody on this podcast will have ever met him, but nobody could let the air out of the balloon like my father. And so I feel like I'm just trying to live up to him.
Is that how that worked?
That's exactly right. He could invent cuss words as we were laying on our backs working on a combine that still have yet to make it to a dictionary. So it was pretty impressive.
Hey, one other thing that I tossed a new lid on today, Swine Life. Some buddies of ours down in Texas, they've become big fans of Thrive, and they've been telling all their friends about it. And so I figured, I'd rep a new lid for the day. Richardson 220 kind of fits me most of the time. It even fits your head, which is an awesome accomplishment. So Swine Life guys, figured I'd give them just a little shout out up front here. Follow them on TikTok. They're always posting videos.
Yeah, I haven't met those guys, but I visit with them online a little bit. Love Thrive, and love to hear them talk about Thrive. Said they put some pigs in a barn and had theirs on Thrive, and theirs stayed healthier than the rest of them, and now everybody's feeding Thrive. So there's a song about, I just want you to love me, and so if you love us, we'll love you right back, right, baby?
If you love bacon and you love us, we like you quite a bit. Is that how that works out?
You are our people for sure. So, hey, we got a lot to get into in this episode. The hard part for me is going to keep this to 25 minutes because I am a nutrition dork.
Yeah, and the other hard part for you is going to be to not completely dork out on us for the day. You guys, we're going to do our best to talk about some really what I think are complex topics, but try to make them approachable for you guys. And I don't want anybody to be scared about it. And that's why I remember looking at a feed tag and thinking, man, there's a lot of numbers on there. There's a lot of words that I don't know what those mean. I'm just going to ignore this and hope everything's okay. And I think as I've learned, and you and I have spent time together talking about feed tags and importance of numbers, and I've learned how to understand those numbers better, I think it's made me a better feeder. And so we're going to try to go through, kind of explain what you're going to see on your feed tag, and we want you guys to be better feeders when we're done.
Absolutely. I am ready to get into this. I am a nutrition nerd. And if you want to see me nerd out, this is the only time that I do it. I will pull out a pocket protector and a calculator at any time during this conversation.
Perfect. Can't wait. Excellent. So let's talk through really high level feed tag 101. What am I going to see on my feed tag when I grab a hold of that? You know, what are the kind of the pieces that I should expect?
All feed tags have a very similar look, and the layout of feed tags and the information that has to be on them is kind of dictated state to state or nationally, depending on how you're selling them. So all feed tags are going to have a very similar look. It is going to tell you, for starters, typically the name of the feed and a usage statement, right? So this one says to increase the digestibility of fight-and-bound phosphorus and complete swine grow finish diets, right? That's a very fancy way of saying feed this to growing and finishing pigs, right? But all of them are going to have some type of a usage statement at the very top, typically. The next thing they're going to give you is the guaranteed analysis. And that's what we typically always get caught up on and talk about all the time. But that's where you see all of the different nutrients and what they are guaranteeing that feed to be, right? And there are some of them that you don't see all the time, and there's some of them you see on nearly all of them, right? And on swine diets in particular, you typically always see crude protein, lysine, crude fat, crude fiber, and then you'll get into some micronutrients or macronutrients in some cases, but calcium, phosphorus, salt. Typically, you'll see selenium, you'll see zinc, you'll see A, D, and E. You'll see all of those vitamin minerals on down there. But they always are giving you either a percentage or a guaranteed amount that is in that feed based on a certain serving amount of it, right? And then below that, you will always see the ingredients, okay? And that's all the stuff they use to make up that feed. And it's important to know those are listed in the order of the amount that's in that particular diet. So if there is more soybean meal than anything else in that diet, you'll see soybean meal listed first. Or a lot of times you'll see, grain protein byproducts or some other scientific name for something like a soybean meal or something that way. But those things are always on there. Also, if there's medication involved, it's always listed on there. Typically, it'll say the name of the feed and say medicated, and then what it's medicated with will be on there every time. A usage statement, this is intended for growing and finishing swine, growing and finishing beef cattle, whatever. Who it's intended to be fed for will be on there. And also the last thing typically is an exclusion statement. And that means what can you not feed it to? And it's really important for all you people that love sheep and goats in particular. There are some feeds that will say, do not feed this to sheep. And that's because of a toxicity or something that's in there that is harmful to sheep. Sometimes you'll see it not intended for use in horses if you're in beef cattle diets, if they have, medication in there that's bad for horses. So it's really important to pay attention to that exclusion statement, and it's on there for a reason, right? So pay attention to it and read it. But that's typically every feed tag is going to include those things.
Talk to me about, I know you mentioned if you're feeding sheep and goats, we're avoiding copper and maybe some other toxicity types of things. What about feeding pigs? Are there any ingredients that I might see on a feed tag and I think I should not feed that to my show pig?
Show pigs they've got a little more, I won't say an indestructible digestive system, but we don't have nearly the same issues with show pigs as what you can run into with small ruminants in particular. And copper is the number one toxicity we run into in the feed world in terms of a nutrient. And that's basically just revolves around sheep and goats. Pigs really don't have that type of an issue. Now, we do have difference in terms of the amino acids we need to pay attention to in swine diets, but typically there's not major toxicities to watch in swine diets versus sheep and goats in particular. The other one that everybody knows about is there are certain ingredients we can put in beef cattle diets that are toxic to horses, right? So If you are feeding beef cattle, don't let your horses eat the feed. That's basically what it comes down to. So, but in pigs, outside of the different amino acids, lysine in particular, that we have to balance diets around, not a ton of big-time toxicity issues in pigs.
So don't let your sheep eat your pig feed, and don't let your horses eat your cow feed. And for the most part, we're kind of within the guardrails of acceptability there.
Yeah, I think those are the most important thing. If you're buying a finished feed in a bag, feed it to the species it's intended to be fed to. And if you do that, you'll keep yourself out of trouble. If you are getting feed made, be very clear to the people making your feed what you're going to feed it to and what other animals are around. So in case something happens, they will understand that as well. Just be very open with the people making your feed. And then if you're buying feed in a finished bag, feed it to the animals that are on the label. That's number one.
So we touched on some of those big macro ingredients a little bit, and I think some of them are familiar to us because we hear about them in human diets all the time. But let's kind of walk through, if you don't mind, the different major nutrients, what we should expect to see on that tag, and maybe then what we should expect to see in our livestock as a result of it. So let's start with the one that everybody probably thinks about first, and that's protein. I'll let the nutritionist speak. You tell me about protein, and let's talk about what we should see in our pig diet.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, protein's almost always listed first. And sometimes it just says protein, and sometimes it says crude protein. And basically you can use those two phrases interchangeably. It's always given as a percentage, and that is the percentage of that feed that is in fact protein. If we just got rid of everything else and you picked up 50 pounds of it, that percentage, if you did the math, that'd be how much real raw protein that you have left, right? And swine diets are going to vary. The most typical swine diets are 16% protein, 18% protein, 20 or above percent protein. We've gotten into a phase with swine now where the lower protein feeds are getting more and more popular as we feed pigs longer and longer and longer, and we have pigs more massive that just need to grow slowly and develop slowly. So now it's not uncommon to see, I think most of the major companies probably have a 10% feed. There's a few places that have an 8% feed, and we're just taking the protein out of those things. So what does protein do? Protein is a building block, right? It's made up of different amino acids, and it is a building block. So muscle development is going to be very dependent upon protein, and the more you're developing muscle, the less you're developing fat typically. And so keeping that kind of growth curve trending towards muscle, and also in a way long bone growth, is what protein is kind of dependent on. So if you have higher protein feeds you're feeding your pigs, you will typically see pigs get leaner and more expressive in their muscle. And as you drop protein, you will certainly see a decrease in muscle expression, right? And that's the biggest thing you're going to see there. Now, as we go up and down on protein, we also change lysine quite a bit, and lysine is the first limiting amino acid in swine diets, and it is really solely responsible for muscle development. I mean, that's its primary function in the body. So as protein goes up, typically lysine goes up, and then you see this more expression of muscle.
And I know lysine is kind of the second ingredient that you're probably going to see on that feed tag there, right, being lysine. And that's one that you and I have talked a lot about. We a lot of times feed off of a protein number, but maybe the lysine is just as important. Now, a lot of times they'll travel in lockstep with each other, but paying attention to lysine, as you called it, the limiting amino acid there, is really, really important as you're working through your swine diets, right? And if we cut lysine back, we're probably going to have a decrease in muscle expression. As we increase lysine, we're going to have more muscle expression. And but those typically work in lockstep on most complete feeds.
That's correct. And to say it's the first limiting basically means that we have to build diets around the percentage of lysine, because if we don't add additional lysine, we will actually leave those pigs deficient at some point in lysine if we don't add it as a supplement. And so that's the first one we have to balance those diets for. And typically on lysine, you're going to see ranges as low as 0.6 or 0.8%. And then as high as, especially on some of these early development feeds, a 1.3 to 1.5 is getting pretty, as we would say, hot in terms of lysine, right? Now, that's on complete feeds. If you look at certain supplements, protein and lysine will be much higher. But you have to remember with all of these things, when we talk about percentages, the animal is not required to have a certain percentage of lysine or percentage of protein. They need a certain quantity every day in order to meet their needs. And you can get that quantity by feeding a whole lot of a moderate protein or lysine number, or you can get it by feeding a very little amount of a extremely high percentage of protein and lysine. So it's kind of like if you and I went on a diet, and I'm supposed to be on a diet, my cardiologist tells me I need to eat 200 grams of protein daily. It doesn't matter if I get those 200 grams by eating something that's 100% protein, or if I get it by eating something that's 12% protein. I've got to get to 200 grams, or he thinks I'm going to get fatter than I am, basically, right? So your pig's the same way. They got to be able to match the amount of that they need. And so knowing how much they're eating and then what the percentage is kind of key to knowing that you're satisfying their needs.
And I think to your point exactly, when we start looking at supplements, they might read quite a bit differently than a complete feed tag. But normally we're not feeding enough of that supplement to actually alter a pig's diet, right? And so if we are feeding a supplement and it says it has 2% lysine in it, but we're feeding them 2 ounces of that supplement, that's only about 1 gram of lysine total for the day, right? And so, it's not going to massively throw off their diet because we're feeding such a small amount of it. And so pay attention on your complete feeds to these numbers. If you're feeding a lot of supplements, it can alter things, but for the most part, complete feeds what's driving the majority of that, just due to inclusion rate, to your point.
This time of year, when people send us, hey, this is my pig and he's eating this, it's not uncommon for us to see people that 60% of that pig's diet is supplements, right? And sometimes these things just got to be pigs and they got to eat pig feed. And so make sure you're satisfying their need with base feed, and then let supplements be just that, a supplement to those nutrients, not the place where you're trying to get those nutrients. There's a big difference there in terms of how stuff stays balanced, and we develop these things right. If you're feeding 70% supplements, man, there's a chance you are way out of balance in terms of, your nutrient profile.
You know what? Being the supplement guys over here, it might not make sense for me to say. I'm a big fan of feeding pig feed, right? And people come and look at my feed board, and they eat a lot of pig feed, and we use supplements to kind of, as you said, supplement them along the way to make small corrections. We make big, massive wholesale changes through our complete feed changes, right? And so, that's kind of the way that I like to think about it. To your point, we get a lot of diets sent to us, and the supplements are the main course. We're eating dessert first, maybe, I guess would be the way I think about it. And so feed pig feed, make sure your pig feed's balanced, and then add in your supplements to kind of fine-tune things along the way. All right, so we've talked about protein. We've talked about lysine. Let's talk a little bit about fat that we're going to see in a pig's diet. And I think everybody understands, or they always think fat makes them fat, but not always the case. But tell me about fat on the feed tag.
Yeah, so the idea that fat makes you fat doesn't always ring true. If you don't believe me, think about the Atkins diet that everybody goes on and how much fat people consume on the Atkins diet. Fat is an energy source, and fat is a very strong energy source, right? And so energy can make pigs gain weight, and when we feed energy to excess, then they can store that extra energy as body fat, right? But it also depends on how many other things they metabolize along the way with it, right? So it's important to pay attention to fat, and it's important to know that fat can be used either to increase growth and increase body fat, or for instance, in our supplement Chiseled, it's going to read a little bit high in fat, and most of that is an oil, but because of the way that's metabolized, it's not going on them as body fat, right? And it's important to know the difference there. Typically, you're going to see fat ranges as low as 3 to 3.5% on a low-fat diet, up to 8-ish%, maybe a little more on really high-fat diets. So what do you see if you feed a higher fat diet? This is what we see typically with the starter feeds. So the 803s, the 611s, name any one of them from any manufacturer. Those things are high in protein, high in lysine, high in fat. And so we are putting a lot of nutrient into those baby pigs, and they're developing bloom, they're developing shape, they're getting that smoother look that we all love to see in them. When you do that to bigger pigs, you get the exact same thing, right? That is how we're going to get bloom and extra body condition and cover, and the smooth look that we're looking for, and the width and mass oftentimes is by those higher fat feeds. Likewise, you got one that's getting pretty chubby. You think, man, that pig looks a lot like Tony Morris. He needs to lose weight. Then we probably need to pull the fat out of his diet in order to get that done.
I think we sometimes overanalyze these diets just a little bit, right? And we're all guilty of it because we all want to perform our best. But I don't know that it's all that different than you and I, right? And calories in, calories out for you and I. We probably have the same idea on some of these show pigs. You referred to it as energy, but it's calories, right? More calories into them, more than what they need. They're going to probably deposit some more fat. Less calories into them, they might deposit less fat. And that's maybe simplifying it just a nickel, but I do think sometimes we do the opposite and we get too complicated on it too.
It's what calories are. Calories are a measurement of energy. Right. And so, more energy in, more you're going to put on more condition typically, right? It all depends on how much energy or calories you are burning throughout the day is how we kind of affect that. But as we go from fat, the next one that's really important is fiber. And fiber is a couple different things. Fiber is going to really help them control digestion and regularity. Just like, if you were struggling in that realm, you might grab some, Metamucil or something like that. That's psyllium fiber, and fiber really affects, digestive regularity. Okay. So there's times we got to add some additional fiber just for that reason. Fiber also is a coarser type nutrient, and it's slower to digest, and it really creates a lot of body fill and shape that you see. So when you need to blow one up and you need them to kind of mass up and get woofy, as we say, oftentimes increasing fiber is part of that, because it's going to give them more physical fill, and it's going to help them just expand or drop gut or those sort of things. But fiber is really important in both those roles. One, you got to have it right for digestion. And number two, it really affects the physical fill of your animal, in this case, show pigs.
When I'm thinking about fiber and I'm looking at a tag, I think it wouldn't be uncommon to see something in the 4, 5, 6, maybe 7% range. Is that probably fair?
Yeah, most of the time in complete diets, we're going to be somewhere in that 5 to maybe as much as 8% fiber. Oftentimes, fiber and fat are pretty similar. So you think about the diets that are going to try to drop bellies and get gilts to look real maternal, they're typically going to be 6-7% fiber, 6-7% fat, right? So we're going to get them smooth and get big bellies in them. The only time that's different, and you see one that's way different than that, some of these holding diets, holding supplements that come out are high in fiber. And when we do that, we're trying to put enough fiber in them to just keep those pigs satisfied. It's slower to digest. It keeps their bellies fuller, longer. So when we're going to a limited amount of feed, we will increase the fiber, mainly because it keeps them quieter. The other thing that does is it keeps their rib and their body shape in a time when we're not letting them eat as much. And when we see that, it's not uncommon to see those type supplements or feeds get up over 20% fiber. Big difference on type of fiber that you use. Probably the most common that we use in show pigs is the good old rolled oats, right? And everybody's got rolled oats around, and we add that. And oats do have some protein. They've got some fat. They got some energy, but primarily they're there for fiber. The other one that's really, really popular is soy hulls. And soy hulls are really easily digestible and create a lot of body and dimension. So a lot of these diets are going to have a high percentage of soy hulls in them as well.
And, as we talk about that fiber, I think sometimes people will use oats and thinking it's high in fiber, they're not going to gain weight. But I do think sometimes there's enough other nutrients in oats to where pigs will keep gaining depending on what's going on. But to your point, using the right kinds of fiber can keep them full, keep digestive tracts moving, right, and become really essential, especially in those holding feeds. They're going to use probably some more non-soluble fibers that don't break down and don't become energy in some of those holding feeds. So, excellent. So that's kind of the big four as I would think about them: protein, lysine, fat, and fiber. Those are kind of the foundation and building blocks for your program that you have at home when feeding your show pigs. There's a lot of other numbers on there, though. Let's think calcium, phos, salt, selenium, zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E. Should I be paying attention to those, or are those kind of, hey, we're probably getting enough in the pig's diet, and maybe I just say, you know what, I'm not going to calculate selenium, across all my feeds?
Yeah, it kind of depends nutrient to nutrient. I will tell you that the manufacturers of these base feeds do a very good job, have very great nutritionists, and that when we talk about having a feed that's balanced or a ration that's balanced, most of the time we are talking about these micronutrients, and you're getting enough of them with what we're going to consider an average intake, right? And so provided that your diet of your individual pig is primarily pig feed and not supplements, typically these things don't become an issue. But they've got all kinds of different things that they do within the body. Phosphorus is really important for skeletal development, and it also really drives lean tissue growth or muscle growth. And selenium is one that's huge for immune function and keeping your pigs healthy. And then it has another function in that it helps regulate tendon elasticity. And so a lot of times you get these things tight and somebody says, hey, give them a shot of Bo-C. That's just injectable selenium. Sometimes we can do that by adding selenium to their diet or finding a nutrient or a supplement that's high in selenium, because that's kind of a unique one. Zinc is another one we pay attention a lot. Huge, important for immune health, very important for just enzymatic function. So all of these micronutrients we're talking about, calcium, phosphorus, zinc, phytase, any of those things, selenium, typically those are really important for like cellular level processes. Your body has to have those in order for cells to function correctly. And feeding more of them or less of them isn't necessarily an advantage, except for some rare instances like selenium, or sometimes like chromium can, drive some muscular growth that way. But for the most part, trust your feed companies. They pay people a lot of money to make sure these things are balanced, and they do a really good job no matter what feed you're feeding.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. They've thought this through. And then in addition, if you're using any TTF nutrition supplements along the way, we've thought about a lot of these things too. And so our inclusion rates that we're telling you to use are not going to dilute out, your micronutrients that are in your base feed. So I don't want to say set it and forget it, but maybe I'll give you the infomercial that if you're using TTF stuff, set it and forget it on your micronutrients. We're not going to throw you way off here, right? And we've thought about these things.
Yeah, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. At the end of the day, the best thing for your pig is pig feed, right? The best thing for them is pig feed. If you need to enhance certain characteristics along the way, reach for a supplement, right? And some of them are to increase or to decrease fat, right? Chiseled, head, neck, jowl. It's got a great reputation. We've hung a lot of banners, a lot of state fair winners with chiseled. Those pigs still ate pig feed, right? We just use this to try to decrease fat in their front end. You take something like hydrate. Hydrate's going to tag out like a feed. It's not a feed. Feed them pig feed. Use hydrate to increase muscle hydration. Thrive is probably the only one that's a little different. It really isn't a feed. It doesn't tag like a feed. It is there just to increase, just improve digestion and gut health and improve immunity along the way. And so use those for what they're intended for. And at the end of the day, your pig needs to eat some pig feed.
Hopefully that's helpful for you guys. We tried to keep it course level 101. Dr. Tony over there, might have given you a taste of the 201 or 301 class every once in a while. But hopefully that's helpful as you guys are at home feeding your livestock projects to start to think about what do these things mean. Don't be scared of what's on a feed tag. Take some time, try to understand it. The great thing is most of these feed companies have websites. They put their tags out there so that you can look at them. Take your time, understand them before you head to the feed store next time. Ask your breeder, ask whoever your trusted contact is if you have a question about those. Or, of course, you can always send us a question as well. Reach out. Facebook, Instagram, send us a TikTok message if you want. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or if you really want to watch us, you can even go to YouTube and watch the full episode of Tony and I, and you can see his I Heart Bacon shirt that he has. So for that, guys, we'll look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.
Hey, to the front, baby.
To the Front has been brought to you by TTF Nutrition. Livestock supplements that get you to the front.